The kitchen smelled faintly of oranges and warm bread, but beneath that comforting fragrance was the unmistakable sting of something broken. Ceramic shards scattered across the floor, tiny white daggers glinting under the ceiling light. Food was everywhere. Bruised fruits, a piece of bread mashed beneath a chair leg, vegetables rolling silently across the tiles as if trying to escape. At the very center of this chaos, a child sat trembling. She couldn't have been older than 7. Her dress, once a pristine white with tiny embroidered flowers, was smeared with stains, fruit juice, breadcrumbs, and tears. Her knees pressed into the hard floor, her small fingers spread out on the cold tiles, as if clinging to the ground to keep herself from collapsing completely. Her blonde hair, usually silky and tied with a ribbon by the housemaid in the morning, now clung in messy strands to her flushed, tear-streaked cheeks. Her lips trembled as she gasped between sobs, and her voice, thin, fragile, desperate, rose again, slicing through the heavy silence. S'il te plaît, arrête. The plea cracked midway, her words swallowed by hiccuping sobs. Above her stood the woman in red. The contrast was almost cruel in its theatricality. The child, small and broken on the ground, and the woman tall and poised. Her figure wrapped in an elegant crimson gown that hugged her frame as though she were stepping out of a gala. Not standing in the middle of a kitchen disaster, her makeup was flawless, though slightly smudged from the heat of her fury. Her lips, painted in a deep shade of red, curled into something between anger and amusement. She gripped the edges of a grey bin, a container heavy with scraps, cereal, nuts, half-eaten fruit, and yesterday's leftovers. With a forceful jerk, she tilted it forward. The contents cascaded down in a messy rain. Cornflakes, pieces of bread crust, a sticky orange peel, peanuts and shells, spilling directly onto the crying girl's head. The sound of it, the clatter of food against tile, the crunch of crumbs, the soft plop of fruit, all of it mixed with the girl's helpless sobs, until the air itself seemed filled with humiliation. The girl flinched, raising her hands to shield her face, but it was no use. Food stuck to her hair, slid down her shoulders, fell into her lap. She squeezed her eyes shut as the avalanche continued, whimpering as though every crumb carried a weight far heavier than it truly did. "Regarde-moi ça," the woman hissed, her voice low, venomous, each word spat like poison. "Tu fais toujours des bêtises. Toujours dans mes pattes, toujours en train de salir la maison. Et maintenant tu pleures?" The little girl shook her head weakly, her lips struggling to form words. J'ai pas fait exprès." Her voice was barely audible. She hadn't meant to spill the juice earlier, hadn't meant to drop the plate that shattered into fragments across the pristine floor. She was only trying to help, to set the table the way her father liked. But one slip of her small hands had been enough to unleash the storm. The woman's laugh was sharp, brittle. "Pas exprès. Toujours des excuses. Tu crois que je ne vois pas? Tu crois que ton père serait fier de toi comme ça?" The girl's chest heaved, her small hands gripping her dress tightly. The mention of her father's name stung. He was her shield, her protector, the only one who smiled at her with genuine warmth. But he wasn't here now. He had left that morning, briefcase in hand, his voice reassuring her that he'd be back soon. But soon felt like forever. And in that void, cruelty had taken root. The woman tilted the bin again, shaking the last scraps out, the cereal crunching as it bounced onto the child's lap. Finally, when it was empty, she let it drop to the floor with a loud thud. The child jumped at the sound, her sobs rising again. "Regarde-toi." The woman sneered, crossing her arms. "Ah, une petite princesse couverte d'ordures. Tu veux pleurer encore? Pleure donc. Tes larmes ne changeront rien." The girl buried her face in her hands, her sobs muffled, shoulders trembling violently. The kitchen grew quieter now, except for the broken rhythm of the child's crying. The woman leaned against the counter, her expression softening not into remorse, but into a kind of cold satisfaction. She enjoyed this power, this cruel dominance over something so small, so defenseless. Minutes dragged on. The girl's sobs slowed but didn't stop. Her hands fell to her lap, her small body shivering in the chill of humiliation. She lifted her gaze slightly, her wet lashes sticking together, and whispered again, "Papa." It wasn't loud, not meant for the woman to hear, just a whisper of hope, a fragile invocation in the midst of despair. The woman did hear, though, and her smile twisted bitterly. "Ton papa," she repeated, mocking. "Il n'est pas là, et il ne verra jamais ça. Tu crois qu'il se soucie vraiment de chaque larme que tu verses?" The girl's lower lip trembled harder. She didn't answer. Deep down, she knew her father loved her. She felt it in the way he hugged her tightly every morning, the way he brushed her hair gently before bed when he had the time. But those words, that sneer, lodged themselves like a thorn in her heart. The kitchen clock ticked slowly, each second stretching endlessly. The child wiped her eyes with her dirty sleeve, her small chest rising and falling unevenly. She wanted to run, to hide under her bed, to disappear, but her legs wouldn't move. They felt rooted to the floor, heavy with fear. The woman sighed dramatically as if bored. She picked up a piece of fruit from the counter, a peach, and bit into it, the juice dripping lazily down her chin. She chewed slowly, deliberately, watching the girl as though she were nothing more than entertainment. "Tu vois," she murmured between bites. "La vie est simple, forte ou faible. Et toi, tu n'es rien qu'une petite chose faible." The girl shuddered. Her small fists clenched on her knees. For a second she wanted to scream, to fight back. But the weight of fear pressed her down again, stealing her courage. Instead, a fresh wave of tears welled up, blurring her vision. Then, the faint click of a door echoed through the house. At first, it was almost imperceptible, but the child's head snapped up, her tears pausing midstream. Her ears, sharp in their desperation, caught the familiar sound. The front door opening, the subtle creak of hinges, the muted thud of a shoe against the polished floor. The woman didn't notice at first. She tossed the peach pit into the sink and turned back toward the girl. But then the footsteps came, steady, confident, echoing through the hallway. Each step drew closer, each second narrowing the distance between despair and salvation. The girl's heart leapt. Her tears, though still falling, now carried a glimmer of hope. Her small lips parted, whispering the word again, clearer this time, trembling with fragile relief. "Papa!" And then he appeared. The doorway filled with the figure of a tall man in a navy blue suit, a black briefcase in hand. His hair was slightly disheveled from the evening breeze, his tie loosened after a long day. But his presence carried weight, authority, the kind that silenced rooms without a word. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, fell instantly upon the scene before him, the child on the floor covered in food and tears, the shattered plates, the chaos of the kitchen, and the woman in red, standing frozen, caught mid-step, the last trace of arrogance fading from her face. For a heartbeat, silence consumed everything. The man's jaw tightened. His hand clenched around the briefcase handle. His breath caught, not in confusion but in horror, anger, disbelief all at once. The child, trembling, lifted her gaze fully this time. Her blue eyes glistened with tears, but also with something else. Relief, recognition. "Papa!" she cried, her voice breaking, her small arms reaching toward him. And in that instant, the room shifted. The cruelty that had reigned in silence cracked apart like glass, shattered by the simple fact of his return. The woman's grip on power slipped away. The child's nightmare had found its witness, and the millionaire had come home. The man's arms closed around his daughter as if shielding her from the entire world. He could feel her small body trembling, her tears soaking his suit, and with each sob, his anger burned hotter. He looked up at the woman, the one he had once trusted, and saw not elegance but cruelty laid bare. Her lips quivered, searching for excuses, but the coldness in his eyes silenced her. "Sors d'ici, immédiatement." His voice cut through the air, calm but deadly, the woman's face drained of color. She stammered, tried to protest, but one step forward from him sent her retreating. In moments, the echo of her heels faded down the corridor, leaving only father and daughter in the wreckage of the kitchen. He knelt, brushing crumbs from her hair, his voice softening. Plus jamais. Tu m'entends? Plus jamais personne ne te fera de mal. The little girl clung to him tighter, whispering through her sobs, Je savais que tu reviendrais, papa. And in that embrace, surrounded by broken plates and spilled food, a vow was sealed. She would never face cruelty alone again.